All right, guys, welcome back to the show. You've seen him here before, Scott Ritter. Welcome back, Scott. What's going on?
Why are you surprised that I was on time?
People aren't usually on time. People aren't usually on time.
I'm doing well, thank you. Yourself?
Doing good. It's been a lot of news that we've been kind of going through. But for those who are not aware, if you've never seen Scott here, Scott is was a former UN Special Weapons Inspector. So, Scott, the first thing I want to ask you about with Russia, there was this announcement from the EU, and they said the EU wants to arm itself for a possible major war in Europe. And from what I read about this, it goes on to say, according to the European Commission, the EU must immediately prepare for the real possibility of a large-scale war with Russia. And it almost kind of sounds like they do not want to depend on the West anymore. They want to arm themselves. Why do you think they think this is a good idea?
Well, I don't know. I mean, because it's not a good idea. So it's impossible really to, let's put it this way. Europe has been beholden to the United States for nearly 8 decades now. Since the end of the Second World War, the United States has been the big brother. NATO was a vehicle for America to maintain a permanent military presence in Europe, ostensibly to serve as a shield against the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and then later to continue to assert American hegemony over Europe, to transform NATO into not something more than a transatlantic defensive alliance, but into a vehicle of global military domination. If you take a look at, what NATO's been talking about, moving to the Pacific, it's always curious how a North Atlantic Treaty Organization justifies a Pacific mission, but that's what NATO is doing. I remember in there was a period of time I attended a conference in Abu Dhabi, hosted by NATO, about a NATO mission to the Persian Gulf. NATO setting up permanent military facilities in the Persian Gulf for a NATO presence to expand into the Persian Gulf. NATO has, talked about dominating North Africa. NATO has become an expansive tool because what NATO was an extension of American foreign policy and national security policy. And during this entire transformation, you have European political and economic elites that are profiting from this. Their entire careers are built upon rubber stamping this American vision of using NATO as the enforcement arm of the rules-based international order. This is the straight up Biden administration nonsense. When the Biden administration published a national security strategy document that said it is that the purpose of the United States, the foremost purpose, is to defend the rules-based international order. I always thought it was, to defend democracy or to defend freedom, but apparently it's the rules-based international order. And these people that we see, the Ursula von der Leyens and others, they are the European bureaucratic class. These are the people who the rules-based international order has given birth to. And so now, having come into power, they are threatened by a Trump administration that is saying, we're not playing this game anymore. I mean, Donald Trump literally ran on a platform that said that the rules-based international order is the greatest threat to international peace and security. When Donald Trump spoke last September and said that the number one threat to America in the world is America itself because of the rules-based international order, all these Europeans stood up and went, wait a minute, that's us. And again, I just want to remind people, it wasn't just a throwaway comment that J.D. Vance made to Zelensky in the White House the other day, where he said, you campaigned against us. Yes, he did. And so did all of Europe. People need to understand that. I don't care if you hate Donald Trump, feel free, get in line. I don't care how you feel about that. Understand that American elections, you remember when they accused Donald Trump of being Russia, that Russia was tipping the scale on that? That all turned out to be a lie, by the way. You know what's in a lie? Europe tipping the scale on behalf of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's what they did. And then because they didn't want Trump to be president, because they are afraid of Trump, because Trump is threatening to shake everything up. And then once Trump got elected, I just want to remind people, it's Europe that worked with the Biden administration, the administration that lost the election, that's going to be replaced by an administration that won a mandate, maybe not as big as Trump says, but it's still a mandate to govern nonetheless, of change. And they worked with Biden to Trump-proof. Trump-proof are the words they used, American policy in Europe, so that Donald Trump would not have any latitude to maneuver vis-a-vis Russia stopping the war in Ukraine. Now, they failed on this, but now Trump comes in. These are three-time losers. These are people who are part of a rules-based international order that is on its way out for the better, I think, of the world. These are people who tried to tip the scale against Donald Trump. And again, Donald Trump is a thin-skinned, narcissistic egomaniac who is vindictive as hell. I mean, if you poke Donald Trump in the eye, you're getting poked back. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's a fact. And they tried to steal the election from him, and then they tried to tie his hands. And now Donald Trump is taking action. Europe is in a panic. And now, why are they doing what they're doing? Well, this isn't their first rodeo with Donald Trump. Remember 2016? Oh, yes, he won an election back then, too, that nobody thought he was going to win. And he ran on a campaign that said he's going to tie up NATO and he's going to do all this kind of stuff. What they did back then was to conspire with a Democratic-controlled Congress, to conspire with the deep state, to tie up Donald Trump, to bind him, to prevent him from doing anything crazy while they just rode him out for 4 years. And then Biden came in and everybody was happy. Biden came in and said, we have a sacred trust to Europe. Those are words that those European power elites love to hear. A sacred duty for Americans to die for Europe. Well, Trump isn't going to let Americans die for Europe. And now the Europeans are trying to play the same game. They are trying to create a situation to complicate, to disrupt Trump's policy prerogatives, and ride him out for 4 years in hopes that somehow in 2 years, the Democrats can reestablish some sort of control over Congress so they can further tie their hands. Because if they don't tie Donald Trump's hands up policy-wise, it's over for them. Sabby, they can't afford to do what they're saying they're going to try to do. I mean, all this talk.
That. And I was wondering that. I was like, how are they going to afford to, but whatever.
800 billion euro is what they're talking about. First of all, I can guarantee you that by the time, if they were serious about doing this, this is going to end up costing them about 3.2 trillion euro, and they're still not going to be able to do it. Let's just put this in a proper perspective. NATO, the military arm of NATO, is atrophied muscle. It's not out of shape muscle. It's atrophied muscle. It's equivalent. Let's say you have a home. Let's say you want to buy a home, or you own a home. I own a home. It's 50 years old. It needs some help. It really does. So if you view NATO as a 80-year-old home that just basically you need to go get a home equity loan. Let's call it an 800 billion euro home equity loan. That's what they're talking about. And you're going to borrow this money and you're going to put a new roof on the house, put a new heater in there, get some siding in, make everything look good and all that stuff. But the problem is, this is the kind of home equity loan that doesn't just hang out there for 10 years. You got to start paying it back immediately. So you borrow the money, and within the first month, payments due at 14%, because that's what they're borrowing at. But now in a home equity loan, it's not as though you get the roof right now. Let's say they say, well, you're going to order the roof, but we're not going to be able to get the roof in for another 2 years. Well, wait a minute. In that 2 year time before I get my roof, I got to be paying this money back. Oh, it's not 800 billion anymore, is it? It's probably down to about 650 billion. before you even got anything done, you've already had to put money out there. And then the same thing with the basement. And what you realize is before you can put the roof on, all the beams are rotten. You got to replace the beams. We didn't budget for that. That's going to be even more money. It's going to take even more. And the lead time and everything is you're going to run out of money before you had anything done. And the house is a wreck anyways. You might as well tear it down. NATO is a rotten edifice. The militaries in NATO are so broken, they can't be fixed. Literally, the only thing that propped them up was the United States military. The promise of American military intervention, the stiffening of their spine. But you take America out of the equation, and Europe literally has nothing. They have no defense industry worthy of the name. They've got no ability to build a defense industry because they've been going in the opposite direction. They've been deindustrializing instead of building a solid industrial base. And their militaries they're corrupt. And I don't mean corrupt in terms of, the kind of corruption about money. They're corrupt in the sense that they don't, let's just be frank. What does the military exist for? Is it a parade ground force? Is it something that you put in the barracks so it looks good on paper? No. A military, to be effective, has to be a killing machine. I mean, I don't mean to be blunt here, but I'm just telling you the truth. If you want to say you have a military, that means that the people that you put in the military, you got to be trained killers. That means you got to put the time and effort in to organize them, equip them, and train them to do this awful job. Europe has not been in the business of being trained killers for 80 years. Well, I shouldn't say that. I would say during the Cold War, they were ready to do the fight. But since 1991, when the Cold War ended, Europe's been in the business of eating schnitzel, drinking beer, and getting fat. They don't fight, and they don't know how to fight. They don't know what fighting is. And if they ever went into combat, they would all die. I'm not talking about sending a handful of Europeans off to Afghanistan where they engage in low-intensity conflict. I'm talking about high-intensity conflict like being waged between the Ukrainians and the Russians. There's not a single European military that can survive in that environment. There's not one. And the reason is they haven't been investing in the military. You can't just turn this around overnight. It's like me, let's say I was a bodybuilder at some point in time and I was, competitive. Trust me, that never happened. But then I went on the couch for a long time. And all I did is eat Doritos and, drink, high fructose corn syrup infused soda pop. And my only exercise was getting up from the couch to the refrigerator and back to the couch. And then about 40 years later, I say, I want to go box or I want to go lift. I'm going to go to the gym for 1 week and get it done. What do you think the odds of that happening are? What do you think the odds of me getting the decrepit body in shape at all? It's going to be hard work. That's what Europe is. They've been on the couch for so long. They don't know how to do anything. They can't even open the door to the gym, let alone get in the gym and lift. The British right now are talking thank goodness for the British military, because Starmer, the prime minister, has been saying, we're going to be the lead. We're going to put boots on the ground. We're going to have planes in the air. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this and that, do this, do that, do this, that. And the military went, we can't do any of that. At least the British military is honest. If you took the entire British military and put them in, a large British soccer stadium, you'd have 30 to 40 unsold seats. The British military is diminished and is shrinking. They can't fight. I think they're able to field, maybe 40 tanks. And I don't know how many of those would be 40 tanks, Sabby, 40 tanks. That's nothing. And they're talking about taking on Russia. And now you have Ursula von der Leyen. Remember, when she was the Minister of Defense of Germany, she broke the German military. That's how bad she is. These people don't know what they're talking about. What they're doing is posturing. They're making noise. They're posturing. They're bluffing. They're trying to convince America not to leave. They want to keep America in. So they're saying, this is what we're willing to do if you leave. Please don't go. But the reality is they can't do any of that. And the good news is the Russians know this. The only thing that bothers the Russians is when the French start talking about flexing their nuclear muscles. That's when the Russians get a little concerned. But when it comes to the conventional aspect of European military power, Russia's not worried at all. A, Russia's not planning on invading Europe. It's just not in the works. And B, Russia's not worried about Europe building up a military that's capable of fighting the Russians. So there's just a lot of talk, a lot of hot air, but Europe can't afford it. I'll just leave you this. Germany tried this, in 2022. Olaf Scholz, the former chancellor of Germany, tried that $100 billion infusion into the German military to make the German military great again. Never a good idea, but he wanted to make the German military great again, 100 billion euro. And they got the money, they borrowed the money. And exactly what I told you was going to happen, they had 100 billion, happened to the 100 billion. They started to invest, and they realized these are all long lead projects that they want. So they have to put the money down, but they have to start paying the money back. Literally within the first year, that 100 billion became 60 billion. Then it turned into 40 billion. Then they ran out of money and nothing was done. Last year, the German defense minister, Pistorius, went to the parliament and said, I need you to increase the defense budget so we can keep this going. And they went, nah, you're getting 1.7%. I think inflation was like 2.3%. What does that mean? That means that the German military, instead of growing as the 100 billion euros was supposed to do, shrunk because they didn't have enough money. They only had enough money. They couldn't keep ahead of inflation. So the Germans, instead of growing the military, had to cut it back further. So that 100 billion euro that they invested to grow their military made their military smaller, weaker, worse. If they spend this 800 billion, if they budget for this, what I can guarantee is this: the European militaries, the collective military, will be weaker, smaller, and Europe will be bankrupt even further. This is the dumbest thing Europe's ever thought of doing.
Interesting. Yeah, when I saw that, I was just like, where are you going to get the money to do that? But whatever. Okay.
They borrow it from themselves.
Yeah, it's just that would just be insane. But I want to pivot to I'm sure you heard about what happened to the two journalists. I want to show this to everybody here. Another thing that happened over the weekend, there were two journalists that were killed in Israel, and shows to everybody.
Developments out of Gaza today, where two Palestinian journalists, Mohammed Mansour and Hussein Shabat, were killed by the Israelis. Last year, 124 journalists were killed around the world, 2/3 of them inside Gaza. Bill?
More to come. Unfortunately, Trey Yingst, thank you. Live until.
Right. So for those who are not aware, I did see the segment earlier this morning that Ryan Grimm covered about those two journalists that were killed in Gaza. Apparently, I guess Ryan may have known one of them as like a work colleague. But it's very apparent what is continuing to happen in Gaza, which I did not expect there to be like real peace. Like, I knew, we talked about this before, that the ceasefire was like a temporary thing, etc. But there have been over 600 people now that have been killed in Gaza since Israel broke the ceasefire recently. Last time that you were here, you said that Trump was playing a different game, and you didn't think that it didn't sound like you were thinking that it was going to go in this direction. But the money that Donald Trump took for his campaign says the exact opposite. So it's like, now we're seeing, obviously, once again, Israel is still killing people in Gaza. Again, a lot of civilians, a lot of children, and they're back to targeting journalists. One of the things that they said on Breaking Points this morning is that those particular journalists were targeted. It wasn't that, I want people to understand that it wasn't that they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were directly targeted. So I'm curious to hear, what is your opinion about that now?
What do you mean? What is my opinion? I condemn the murder of journalists. Clearly, truth is not the friend of Israel or the friend of the United States. Remember, whatever Israel is doing in Gaza is a policy that's been greenlit by the United States, supported by the United States. I don't understand what Trump is doing here. I take a look at his Russia policy and I see a man who is dedicated to bringing about peace, and therefore I take him seriously, or I took him serious. I took him at face value when I extended that embrace of peace and peaceful outcomes to the Middle East. And why not? He sent Steve Witkoff in there and got a ceasefire when Biden was unable to get a ceasefire. And so I was, convinced that he was promoting peace. This seems to have gone off the grid. Not only is Israel doing whatever the hell they want to do in Gaza, which is the equivalent, basically continuing their genocidal policies of the past, and it is genocide. And one of the reasons why they kill journalists who are on the ground in Gaza is because they want to deny the rest of the world access to accurate reporting about the crimes that are being committed on a daily basis by the Israelis. But then he goes off and he doubles down. Remember, Donald Trump in 2019 said that he condemned people for getting us involved in endless wars in the Middle East and wars that take American treasure and cost American lives. And then he gets us involved in a shooting war in Yemen, where we have American bombers flying multiple sorties over Yemen every day, killing hundreds of Yemeni civilians, many of them children, bombing hospitals, doing to Yemen what Israel does to Gaza. So that's not a man of peace. And now we're being told that he's dispatched a number of B-2 bombers and tankers to Diego Garcia to begin an air campaign, at least threatening to be an air campaign against Iran. Literally going to get us involved in that war that he claimed that he didn't want us to get in. I thought when Donald Trump posted on his social media the video clips of Jeffrey Sachs condemning Benjamin Netanyahu for getting America tied down in wars in Iraq and elsewhere, that was Donald Trump's way of saying, I'm not going to make that same mistake, but it looks like he's making that same mistake. I had thought that maybe if he had surrounded himself with Zionists, that it was sort of a take on The Godfather, keep your enemies your friends close, but your enemies closer. But no, it turns out that the Zionists are calling the shots on Middle East policy. And, I was wrong. What can I say? The facts speak for themselves. I was hopeful. I wanted to believe that Trump was serious about giving peace a chance. But actions speak louder than words. And right now we have American aircraft bombing Yemeni civilians. We have more aircraft massing. He sent a threatening letter to the Iranian leadership that foreclosed any opportunity or any potential of direct negotiations between the United States and Iran. And unless there's some, big game being played here, that, in the end, he pulls a rabbit out of the hat or something like that, it looks like we're headed for a major Middle Eastern conflict. And the one that Donald Trump said he campaigned on, saying he didn't want to get involved in.
Well, I'm glad that you admit that, Scott, because I think,
well, just say, I don't admit anything. See, I'm an analyst, Sabrina. I'm a professional analyst. This is what I did my entire life. This isn't about admitting you were wrong. You know what analysts do? They make assessments based upon the available facts. When I made the facts to you last time, we weren't bombing Yemen. When I made the facts to you last time, we didn't have airplanes, gathering in Diego Garcia. What I do and what I did for a living, remember, I used to brief, the White House, Secretary Generals, Commanders in Chief. I wasn't some amateur. What you do, though, is things happen. You brief based upon the situation, and then data comes in, and you look at the data and you go, hey, things have changed. It's not that I was wrong. I mean, I was wrong in my prediction. Predictive analysis is always a tricky game. It's like being a weatherman. You don't know exactly what the weather's going to do. But I'm not going to sit here and play the game that I was wrong. I was right at the time. I was right at the time because we weren't at war. I was right at the time because he did have a policy that said he wanted peace. I put certain emphasis on certain things, but, analysts always have to reassess situations, and the good analysts do so without fear. But what I don't want to do is open the door for people going, Scott Ritter was wrong. And I'll tell you what, why don't you come and do this for a while? All you people out there to take the cheap shots, go to the White House and see how you stand up giving predictive analysis to the Situation Room. Stand in front of that audience and do. I've done it twice. All right, guys, this is what happens. Things happen. What you have to do is call it as you see it. And right now I'm calling it as I see it. We may find out that Donald Trump isn't going to bomb Iran. And now we have to come around. And when that happens, I have to, you brief me on your show. I'll say, looks like Donald Trump didn't bomb Iran. So now what is the game? And then you have to do that all over again. It's not a mark of shame to get it wrong. It's a mark of shame not to absorb the new information and put out. And anybody can sit there and say, oh, I knew this was, then God, do the job. Don't rely on me. If you can do this, if you've got the crystal ball, then you come out and do this for a living. All right. It's a tough thing to do. But no, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I was wrong. And I don't apologize for anything. I gave you honest assessment then, and I'm giving you honest assessment now. And that's just the way it goes. In the world of, high level analysis, you got to change your assessment every day. That's why they call certain events game changing events. That means that, you could be a sport analyst. I think the Patriots are going to do great this year. And they are. They're moving. Tom Brady breaks his leg. I don't think the Patriots are going to do as well as I thought they were going to do. Why? There was a game-changing event. Tom Brady broke his leg. Oh, so you had to change things. Do you admit you were wrong? No. When I made my initial assessment, Tom Brady's leg wasn't broken. But now it is broken. It's, and I don't mean to come off on you. I'm not picking on you. It's just, I'm fed up with, the long range snipers from, the people in the cheap seats who thinks that this is an easy thing to do. Give it a shot. Try it.
Are you talking about social media?
Oh, I hate social media with a passion right now. I'm fed up because the other thing that happens, I mean, you get the moralizers out there. For instance, I'll say, Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. Statement of fact. Iran is obliged under the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty not to have nuclear weapons. Statement of fact. Iran has behaved in a way which has caused concern for the International Atomic Energy Agency about its nuclear program. Statement of fact. And if Iran does produce nuclear weapons, it would, by definition, constitute a threat to international peace and security. Statement of fact. That the Security Council of the United Nations, statement of fact, might authorize military force to be used against it. And if I say all that, they go, Scott, no, Iran has a moral right to have nuclear weapons. Well, you know what happens when you say that? You just disinvited yourself from any real world table where this issue could be resolved. I have no problem with people saying we shouldn't bomb Iran and we should be seeking alternative methods to deal with Iran. I'm all on board with that. But when people are lecturing me, an arms control specialist who's been doing this at the tippy end of the spear for a long time, and they say, no, Scott, forget the NPT, forget treaties, forget all that. Iran has a moral obligation to have nuclear weapons. I say, you're literally insane. You don't know what you're talking about, but you can say this on social media and get away with it. But you know where you can't say it? In the halls of power. In the places in the world where real things happen.
Well, do you think anyone should have nuclear weapons?
I think that when the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty was signed, there were 5 declared nuclear weapon states. So they are allowed to have nuclear weapons, but they also agreed as part of the NPT to work towards getting rid of these weapons. That is their moral obligation to build a nuclear-free world. So I believe there are nations that are legally permitted to have nuclear weapons, and I also believe that these nations have a moral duty to live up to the promises that were made when the NPT was signed to get rid of nuclear weapons. But since that time, we've seen the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and we've gone from the 5 original members who were the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, and we've added India, Pakistan, North Korea has been brought in, Israel has been brought in. They're not a signatory, neither is North Korea anymore. It's become a very complicated situation, and what I don't want to do is to see it become even more complicated. What I'd like to do is to see a situation where we can wrap our hands around this and begin the process of nuclear disarmament, creating a denuclearized world. That's responsible talk. But there's people out there saying, no. I mean, the other one I like is everybody should have nuclear weapons. Again, you're not going to get, this may fly on social media where you have a bunch of ill-informed, well-meaning people who are saying all this. I can guarantee you that's never spoken where real decisions are made. And that's the problem with social media, is that it exists in an environment where no real decisions are made. It's a free flow, which is fine. I think it's great to have the free flow of information, but to pretend that you Your voice matters when you say Iran should have nuclear weapons. Not even Iran will agree with you on this one. And I can certainly tell you that the rest of the world would never agree with this. But that's the problem with social media, is that you get just a lot of unrealistic moralizing from people who, frankly speaking, don't have the resume that that would normally allow them to be present to make such a case. But social media, anybody can become the expert of the day. And that's what happens. They all become experts of the day.
I don't think you should have to have a resume, but I will say that I don't agree with nuclear weapons at all. I don't think any country should have nuclear weapons.
I'm on board with you. I'm a big global zero guy. I believe that all nuclear weapons. But now the question I have for you, Sabrina, is how do we get there? How do we get from where we are today to there?
There has to be a demand from the powers that be to de-arm.
Right, but how do we create the confidence? For instance, when you're the Russians and you have this nuclear arsenal, and the United States has been saying for the last several decades that together with NATO, we're seeking the strategic defeat of Russia, and the only thing that prevents them from acting on that decisively is Russia's nuclear deterrence. And so now you're the Russians, and Sabrina and Scott are going, you got to get rid of the nuclear weapons. And they're going, that ain't going to happen. How about the Chinese? They wake up one morning and found out that America is getting ready, prepared to launch a nuclear preemptive attack regarding Taiwan. The Chinese go, that's not a good thing. We're going to modernize our nuclear force. We're going to make it complicated, build silos, put things in the ground. So they just expanded it, and now they've created genuine nuclear deterrence. And now Sabrina and Scott go, but you got to get rid of your nuclear weapons. And they're going to go, that ain't going to happen. North Korea is going to go, hey, let me mention two names to you, Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. And there's a reason why Kim Jong-un ain't going to give up his nuclear weapons, because regime change is the American policy. You see, we live in a real world. And while I agree that we should be getting rid of these, how do we get there is the question. And the best way to get there is not to allow anybody else to build nuclear weapons capability, which is why I'm adamantly drawing the line at, with Iran. Because the second you say, well, it's okay for Iran to have it, then Saudi Arabia is going to want them. Turkey may want them. It's a dangerous situation. So this is why I supported Donald Trump in his first term and his denuclearization effort with North Korea. The one that everybody mocked. How dare he meet with Kim Jong-un? Well, my God, how do you expect North Korea to get rid of their nuclear weapons if you don't have these meetings and build confidence, trust, so that they can believe that they will be safeguarded if they get rid of these weapons? We have to start talking about how we build a universe in America, in the world, where people can be comfortable getting rid of nuclear weapons. But that can't happen when you have a screaming mass of people out there saying, no, the global South must create their own nuclear deterrence against the imperialist forces of the United States. Well, Sabrina, if that's their thinking, we're never going to get rid of nuclear weapons, because all we're going to see is proliferation. And then one day they're going to be used. And chain reaction, we all die. This is why, nuclear disarmament is it's just extremely difficult thing to do. I've done it. I'm one of the few people that actually did it. And I can tell you how difficult it is to get that job done, to build up a treaty framework for that. All these people out there screaming, you can't have treaties with America. Well, you know what, guys? The Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, when it was in operation, was an American treaty. And we got rid of an entire class of nuclear weapons that threatened international peace and security and could have brought the end of Europe. We got rid of them. That's America did that. Imagine that, America doing something good. Americans doing something good, because it was American inspectors going over to the Soviet Union to implement it, and the Soviet inspectors coming to America to implement that. We are capable of doing good things. And I'd like to believe that we could do good things again in the future. And that's why I push back against people who keep screaming how bad America is, how evil America is. I'm not going to sit here and say that everything America does is good. I'm not even going to say most of the things we do is good. We got a lot of problems. But you know what? We're big. We're powerful. You can't ignore us. And the best thing to do is to try and get the American people to facilitate change from within so our government reflects the values that we claim to do, so we are better global neighbors. But I don't know how you feel about this, but I'd like to believe that Americans can solve the problems of America, and we don't need all the others in the world trying to chop us down while we're doing it, because it's difficult to try and solve the many problems we face. Having people come at and try and take your knees out. So yeah, I push back against anybody that pushes up against America, because I believe that America is the most powerful nation on the planet today, and we have the greatest capacity to do good if we just give ourselves a chance to do that. And I'm not going to sit back idly while people try to diminish America. I know our history. I know our history very well, and I'm not proud of our history. We've done many things wrong, but like I said, I'm a living example of a time when we did things right. And what we did is we saved the world from nuclear annihilation. That's sort of a big one. So I'll take that ledger any day of the week.
Who's trying to take our knees out?
Again, you get the voices from the global South. I'm not going to empower them by naming them here on your show, but there's a number of people out there that promote anti-imperialism. Okay, I'm all for that. But anti-imperialism means anti-Americanism. It means that they are against America, that they wish America harm. Sabby, you can go on X and see it all day long. The people that say America is evil, America must be brought down, etc. And that the reason why I'm bringing this up is that we speak of trying to build up alternative media and social media as an alternative to mainstream media. I think we could be in agreement that mainstream media is fundamentally broken and corrupt and is incapable of putting the real truth out there. And so if we're trying to take fact-based argument and transfer it from mainstream media to alternative media and to social media platforms to engage in the kind of debate, discussion, and dialogue that's necessary to solve these problems, to empower people with knowledge and information, then only to find that as you try to speak out, you get drowned out by the voices that hate America, want to bring America down, and all that stuff. That sort of negates the value of alternative media and social media. Instead of having the clarity of purpose. And then what happens is we drown ourselves out with the cacophony of noise, and mainstream media reemerges as the dominant source of news because they're able to do that unchallenged. They don't have people trying to contradict them.
I'm still stuck on the anti-imperialism piece. Anti-imperialism doesn't mean that you hate America. It means that you want the U.S., you want this country to stop stealing resources from other countries and impoverishing those countries in doing so. That doesn't mean that you hate the United States.
It means, well, actually, Sabrina, if you read their post, they want America to collapse. That
So
sort of means you hate America. That means they hate you, by the way. They want your economy to collapse. They want you to lose your job. They want our society to fall apart. And I'm not in favor of that. And I will never support that.
I think you might be taking the opinion of a couple of people on social media as what anti-imperialism is. And I highly I highly recommend that you don't do that. It's just like, I mean, these, you don't even know who some of these people are, right? Like sometimes these are just accounts. So I highly recommend that you're not taking their word for what anti-imperialism means. Anti-imperialism means that you just really don't think that the U.S., this country, which has been doing so for so long, should not be stealing resources from other countries. It doesn't mean
what anti-imperialism means, Sabby. I know exactly what it means, and I know what our country has done, the good and the bad. What I've chosen to do, and this is what irritates so many people, is I've chosen to draw a line between, and people are like, "Oh, you jumped on the Trump bandwagon." What I did do is I said that I accept this, that Trump is fundamentally different from the past. If you've been studying me at all, you know that I was very anti-Biden. I was anti-Trump the first time around. I was anti-Obama. I was anti-Bush. I was anti-Clinton. Why? The very things you're talking about, the imperialistic, hegemonic policies of the United States. And one of the big problems I had with these policies is that they were leading us towards unsustainable global confrontation that would ultimately lead to nuclear war and we'd all die. And we came so very dangerously close to that last fall. I don't think Americans realize how close we came twice, in September and November, of having a nuclear war with Russia. Only now people are starting to recognize just how dangerous that was. We have a president now that's trying to change that, move us in a different direction. Is he perfect? Not even close. Does America still have what we call imperialist policies around? Of course we do. We still do bad things around the world. But the big picture is we're trying to move in a way that prevents nuclear war. That means that I need to be supportive of these policies. And it's very difficult to say that you support these policies while you're attacking, the foundational aspects of the government or the nation that this president represents. When you have a president commit that the rules-based international order is the enemy, why don't we give him a chance to actually follow through on policies to dismantle? Because you know what the key to American imperialism is? You know, the facilitating vehicle for that, the vectors, it's the rules-based international order. We steal from people in so many ways, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and all this stuff. These are the things that this president's trying to dismantle. And so I'm in favor of giving him a shot. I know he does bad things. I know I'm not sitting there going to sing the praises of Yemen or Gaza or Iran and those policies. But I think that, we have to understand that there has to be a balance here, that he's trying to do things to alter the way America interfaces with the world. And there's just people out there that don't want to give him a chance. My response is, what are the alternatives? What are the alternatives? If you're going to say you're going to oppose this president, you want him to do what? Continue the rules-based international order? Continue using the IMF and the World Bank to hold third world, global South economies hostage to the whim of American policy?
I think that those things would happen regardless if the president was a Democrat or a Republican, if it was Trump or Biden, because the reality is you can't continue to steal from these countries and then say things like, I don't want the people to leave those countries and try to go somewhere else, or I don't want any type of revenge from those people. And if you look at some of the countries that the US government has just completely demolished, in my opinion, like Haiti. If you look at Haiti, if you look at Yemen, if you look at Somalia, you look at all these countries that the US government is not just the US, but is mainly the US, that the US has destroyed, and then just leave the people there and say, live in that. So this type of behavior that we put out into the world, it comes back home. When people ask, like, why can't we respect each other here in the United States? We don't even respect. We have no respect. So how are we going to treat each other with some type of dignity? How are we going to support our neighbor and lift each other up when we're destroying the world?
I don't disagree with you at all. My question is, how do we get out of that? And I start with the basic premise of we have to be alive to get out of that. That we can't solve anything if we're dead, because then the problem solved itself. And to me, the number one threat to the United States of America in terms of its existential survival is nuclear war. And as I said, Haiti didn't almost kill all Americans last year. Russia did, our policies towards Russia. And so I have decided that I am going to prioritize my attention on saving America and the world from nuclear war by focusing my effort on what Trump is trying to do with Ukraine. And by extension, what he's doing with NATO. You and I talked about the danger. NATO is an organization that was pushing us towards global confrontation. So if Trump is trying to disentangle America from NATO, isn't that a good thing? Shouldn't we view that as a good thing?
Right. That's a good thing. But still, I know obviously, you're against like nuclear war. I think the majority of people are. None of us really want that to happen. But it's not just Russia. There's also the Middle East. So if we are heading towards some type of conflict with Iran, which it seems like that's what Israel wants to happen, that threat is still there. So to answer your question, when you say, how do we fix this? Obviously, this is a more long-term project, but the real answer is you have to get corporate money out of electoral politics.
But how do we do, but how do you and I do that? Congress won't even touch that issue with a 10-foot pole because, how do we get Congress to pass laws that do that?
You have to stop voting for people that take corporate money.
Right, but we don't have another election for 2 years.
Look, you can start, you're right. You don't have another one for another 2 years, but this doesn't just apply with Congress. This applies on the local level as well. This is why I said, the root of all of this is money. That's why we have these wars. That's why, the government, they have this connection with the military industrial complex. So there's that. And then they have the connection with Wall Street. So as long as you have big money interests and you have lobby interest groups that are writing legislation in Congress, that's why these things don't change.
You and I are speaking the same language. I'm 100% behind that. I've been saying this forever. I mean, I get in, I get in big debates with people about Citizens United. And the consequences of that legislation. When you start calling corporations the equivalent of people when it comes to free speech and money, you've just destroyed you and me, because you and I, maybe you someday, because you've got it in you, but I'm never going to be as successful enough to where I can write checks that can balance out a corporation's ability to influence politics. And the bottom line, even if I could, I wouldn't, because that's wrong. You got to take money out of politics. We have to find a way to let ideas be what drives, to make sure that when we vote for people, it's not because they have the best advertisement and able to buy off this, that, and the other thing, that it's the person that can stand in front of an audience and articulate ideas about issues that matter, that get voted in. So we're on the same page on that one. But I keep, I also have to operate within my, parameters of my expertise. And so my primary expertise is nuclear nonproliferation, disarmament, and, military issues. I'll be the concerned citizen about everything else, but, my voice will be louder in the areas where I actually have a certain amount of expertise. And so I've made a decision to prioritize these issues over other issues. First of all, none of us can do everything. And what happens if you try to become a master of all trades, was a jack of all trades, but a master of none? And then we get beat. We really do have to become a collective of self-supporting expertise, where we support each other as we move towards this common goal, this common objective. Sabby, I get depressed every day when I read the news, because the news is horrible. The world we live in is a horrible place. And there's things happening that we don't even, Gaza is just, mind numbing. But you know what else is mind numbing? The situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where you have 30 to 40,000 children, slave laborers in these open pit mines, where they actually carve the cobalt out of the soil with their hands, poisoning their young bodies while they're doing it. And we Americans do it so we can have this. And we don't say a damn word about it. We just ignore it so that we can have this and have this computer that you and I are talking over and all this stuff. And, that sickens me. And that's happening.
A lot of people don't know about it too, by the way.
Yeah, but then you go around the world as you expand, and you just realize the amount of harm that it's not just America. That's the other reason why I take offense at look. I know America's sinned a lot, yes, and we should work to fix this, and we must work to fix this. But we're not the only ones that have these little shiny phones. The whole world has them. This is a global problem. And global greed is an issue as well. China gets a pass on just about everything because, of course, China is just simply the, economic counter to the American imperialism and all that. Well, China does a lot of things around the world that they need a lot of the cobalt as well. all nations are guilty of this. And so the question now is, how do we collectively, move in the right direction? And again, my premise is we got to be alive to do that. So that's why I put a heavy emphasis on trying to stop nuclear wars and trying to stop nuclear nonproliferation. It's not because I don't think everything else is important, but the last time I checked, there's 24 hours in a day. Doctor tells me I'm supposed to sleep for 8 of those hours. I go to sleep for about 4 of those hours. It ain't enough. And then, I've got to eat. I've got to work. I got to write things, but I'm supposed to absorb information too. And as you know, today, it's a fire hose of information coming at us on this internet thing. And it's not just reading information, but it's also discerning what's good information from bad information. It all takes time. And so you have to prioritize what the stories are that you feel are the ones that you can dig it. Because as you know, if you start attacking an issue and you haven't done your job right, you're going to get slaughtered with the people coming at you. Because when you have a profile like you have, or like I have, people watch. And believe it or not everybody's out there to applaud you and thank you for what you're doing. There's people out there that just get the kicks off of ripping you apart. And if you give the trolls, yes. And again, maybe you're right. I mean, you're right. My wife has said the same thing. I spend too much time. But the problem is when you pour yourself into something, when you think you're trying to do the right thing, and you are literally exhausting yourself trying to do the right thing, and then it just overwhelms you. I mean, that's why, for instance, I've turned off comments. I used to like to read the comments, just because it's sort of like getting a EKG of how how the interview's going. I've stopped reading comments a long time ago, and but the problem is with like Twitter, or I guess X we call it now. That's how I get my news, and so I'm going to be exposed to things, and I'm only human. I read everything. I'm stupid. I should have the filter that says, don't read this, don't read this, don't read this, don't read. But I read everything, just like I don't know. I can't speak for you, but most people do. And it just gets down. It just, after a while, you're just like, why do I even bother? Why do I even do this? I really could get up in the morning and go fishing, and that would be a lot of fun. The problem is one morning I'd go fishing, I'd be casting my line out there, and I'd get 2 sunsets because the world just ended. And I'd like to believe that I can still contribute to processes that can prevent that from ever happening. So that's why I get up in the morning. That's what I do. And I do it with a pure heart, and trying to accomplish a mission that I think is beneficial to all. Do I step on toes? Sure. Why not? The shirt says Marines. It doesn't say, Mr. That's the soft touch. I have the opposite of the soft touch, and sometimes I rub people the wrong way. But it's not because I'm trying to be a counter troll or whatever. I'm just mission focused. I'm mission focused on the job I'm trying to accomplish, which is literally at this point in time to help prevent a nuclear war. And just so people know that it's not an issue of ego, meaning I'm trying to promote. We actually had a great success last year where the projects that I were involved in helped inject the fear of nuclear war into mainstream politics, and to get policies changed that actually helped take us off the path towards nuclear war. I'm not going to take sole credit for this, but I'd like to believe that I was part of the force that was put on a vector to help shift that policy away. And maybe what I was doing was just enough to get that finally to change direction. So this isn't a futile effort. This isn't about narcissism. This isn't about, stroking egos. It's about real change. And I would also say that if the government hadn't seized my passport last June and I'd been able to do some of the things, that this progress would be even more manifest. And I'll get my passport back. I'll get back on the road, and I'll continue to do what needs to be done. Will I step on toes along the way? Yeah, it's going to happen. And I apologize to anybody whose feelings are hurt when I do step on your toes. It's not done deliberately.
I try not to spend just a little tip for me. I try not to spend a lot of time on social media, even Twitter, and I get a lot of my news from there too. But I try not to spend as much time on there, and I try my best not to be on there too late. Also at night. I just don't think it's healthy for your sleep. I don't think it's the best for mental health to spend a lot of time on social media. So oftentimes people would be like, "Well, I tagged you in this, I tagged you in that." I'm like, "Yeah, that's it." Like I just don't. I'm not old school, but I'm also not like I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial. So I remember what it was like to not have social media. So for me, it's just I'd rather spend more of that time with people like face to face instead of like on social media all the time. Sometimes it's good to take breaks. And I tell this to everybody. Sometimes it's good to take breaks from social media, especially it's more so Twitter, to take those kind of breaks because it can be toxic, at times.
It's extraordinary. My problem is my dogs wake me up every day around 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And then I let them out and then the cats want to come in. So the point is around that time, if the funny thing is, if you go check when I post all my ex posts take place in a span in the morning because I'm literally waiting for the dogs and the cats to do something. So I'm on the phone just, and it's in the morning, so my judgment may not be the best. And so I'm like, you said this. Yeah, da, da, da. And next thing you know, you're involved in one of these stupid Twitter wars. And my wife wakes up and says, "What did you do? Stop it. Put the phone down. Grow up."
It can be that well. I hear you. It can be that well. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. Anything you got coming up next you want to let everyone know about?
No, I mean, I will, if you allow me, just to say a word about a new project that I've been involved in this last month or so called the Russia House. It's on Telegram. It's a subscription-based service just because of the political realities right now. It's run out of Russia. I make no money, but we have to pay. The project has to pay for interpreters. We have professional editing, but basically it's the counter to Russophobia. We're bringing Russian voices to an American audience. We've had a number of really great interviews. I just did an interview with Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson of the foreign ministry, that started as an interview and ended up as a fascinating conversation as she put down her notes and started talking from the heart. And every conversation I have with the Russians always ends that way, with a conversation from the heart. So the Russia House, if you guys have the ability to, if anybody is interested in empowering themselves with the Russian point of view, the Russia House on Telegram, and you can go to scottritter.com and you can see how to get to that.
All right, Scott Ritter, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.